There is a receptors that are different type of receptors in the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. So in the sympathetic system, you have the adrenaline or epinephrine and norepinephrine. So noradrenaline is there. So the receptors, that's why the receptors are called adrenergic. You have subdividing those receptors, so alpha and beta. Then the alpha is again divided between alpha 1 and alpha 2. Alpha 1 is more excitatory and alpha 2 is more inhibitory. Beta is divided between beta 1, which increasing activity, beta 2 is decreasing activity, and beta 3, which is increasing activity, increasing fat breakdown. The cholinergic one is shared with the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. So mainly it is in the part of the parasympathetic system, but some areas of the sympathetic system also have cholinergic receptors. So the cholinergic receptors are divided into two. One is nicotinic, the other one is muscarinic. The nicotinic ones is usually excitatory, and they are located between the preganglionic and ganglionic neurons. So I will show it to you later. This is both in the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. You also see the connection between an axon and the skeletal muscle. That receptor in the skeletal muscle is also cholinergic because the neurotransmitter that are released in the skeletal, the somatic nervous system is acetylcholine. Muscarinic is a little bit different, sometimes excitatory, sometimes inhibitory, and the muscarinic is seen in the tissue that are supplied by the parasympathetic nervous system. All of the tissue that are supplied by parasympathetic nervous system, and some of the receptors in the sympathetic nervous system that release acetylcholine. So that is the exception in the sympathetic system, that majority of them are releasing norepinephrine, but only some that release acetylcholine. And the one that release acetylcholine, they have the receptors, and the receptors are the receptors are called muscarinic because they respond to acetylcholine. And those tissue are usually in the periphery and not in the visceral organs, usually in the periphery. So this is actually a summary of those two slides that I talk about it. So we can divide this in the sympathetic system and parasympathetic system. You can see the sympathetic system is in the visceral organs and also in the body walls and limbs. And the parasympathetic system is mainly in the visceral organs. So starting with here, you can see that the cell bodies are somewhere in the central nervous system. The preganglionic is usually short, and then they release acetylcholine. So this is the ganglionic neuron, and the receptors here are responding to acetylcholine. So this is why these are called cholinergic receptors. So if they are between the two neurons here in the ganglion, these are called nicotinic. Okay, between the two neurons in the ganglion, and if the neurotransmitter is acetylcholine, that's called nicotinic cholinergic. Anytime there is a responding to acetylcholine, that's called cholinergic, but because it is in the ganglion, that's called nicotinic. It's a little bit different because these are the excitatory ones. So then the postganglionic neurons are there. So usually it is long, and then majority of the neurotransmitters in the sympathetic nervous system is norepinephrine, and then the receptor in the tissue, these are called adrenergic receptors. Adrenergic receptors, this is in the tissue. Another one, this is an exception there, so that is the adrenal gland. The preganglionic is very long, so adrenal medulla is there, postganglionic is short, and Adrenal medulla release epinephrine and norepinephrine. It's not shown here in this image, but you just add here norepinephrine as well. And the receptors here is again adrenergic. So the exception here in the sympathetic system is this one. This is the preganglionic, is short again. Acetylcholine is released here, similar to this one and similar to this one. So all three of them, these are the nicotinic cholinergic receptors, nicotinic cholinergic, because all three of them, the connection between the preganglionic and ganglionic neurons are, in the ganglions, acetylcholine is released, so it's a cholinergic receptor, but here is a difference here. This one releases acetylcholine instead of norepinephrine, acetylcholine. So the receptors is muscarinic cholinergic. Because it is acetylcholine, it is cholinergic, but the function is a little bit different. The response is a little bit different. This why is muscarinic. Here you had adrenergic because it was responding to norepinephrine. Here is cholinergic because it is responding to acetylcholine. But there is two different type of cholinergic receptor. One is muscarinic, which is in the tissue, and the other one is nicotinic, which is in the ganglion, connection between the ganglionic and preganglionic neurons. For the parasympathetic system, so preganglionic is very long, it's myelinated, it's releasing acetylcholine, and in the ganglion there is receptors there with the ganglionic neuron, and those receptors are responding to acetylcholine, so it means it's cholinergic, and that type of receptor is called nicotinic. That is similar to the sympathetic nervous system, so there is no difference here. Postganglionic are unmyelinated, they are short, and they are releasing always acetylcholine. So in the sympathetic system, there are three different types of neurotransmitters, but in the parasympathetic, is only one, and that's the acetylcholine. And again, the receptors in the tissue for acetylcholine is cholinergic, and that is the muscarinic.